How's it going, everybody? My name is John, and I get the pleasure of talking about the Joe Rogan Experience for the second time in a row as JD Vance follows Donald Trump's footsteps and hops on Joe Rogan for an even longer conversation of 3.5 hours. So without further ado, there's a lot to get to, so let's jump right into it.
14-year-old was 2. We were on a skiing trip, and we were about to leave. We packed up all our stuff, but her helmet, we forgot to put her helmet away. I go, we forgot to put the helmet away. And she just looks down at the helmet and she goes, shit. And my wife is just like, oh my God.
And I was taking my 4-year-old solo, he was 3 at the time, on this trip, and we're on like a Delta flight. My son drops one of those Biscoff cookies in between the seat, and he looks at me and he says, Dad, 12 people instantly turn around and look at me, and it's like, oh, Senator Vance, your son has such colorful language. And I'm like, oh my God.
I show these stories not only because they're funny, but because I feel that JD Vance takes a W here just by coming across very relatable, which is something on the other side of the coin you just don't see. I've never heard Harris or Walz tell any sort of stories about their kids like this or laugh like that. Whenever Harris laughs, it doesn't come across so good. But I think that's a great quality of why Trump picked JD as his VP, just because he's extremely relatable and apparent. Further illustrating his relatability, JD Vance tells a story about how his 7-year-old has been playing Secret Service in school.
One of his buddies, their parents came to us and said, do you know that the kids are playing this game in school called Boss Man, where basically one second grader will walk down the hallway or down the playground flanked by 2 separate second graders.
Like they're playing Secret Service now?
Secret Service.
These stories and jokes that JD's telling is something that you just don't see from the other side. Part of it might be because Harris doesn't have any biological children of her own, and Walz just comes across like a weirdo, so they're not going to talk about these things. But JD Vance's relatability is definitely going to win him some points amongst voters when the Democrats just seem to fail every time they try.
Age where Pong was coming online. Like I'm first generation gamer. I was a master of asteroids in the arcade, was the only place you could play it. Original Pac-Man.
On the subject of Secret Service, though, the conversation takes a sharp turn into the subject of the Butler, PA attempt. Joe Rogan tells a lot of interesting facts about that.
A lot of weird stuff to it. One of them is that his where he lived was professionally scrubbed. So he got there was no silverware. There's no silverware.
That's
the place
bizarre.
Is scrubbed.
Right?
Yeah, there's nothing. There's no DNA, no hard drives, no nothing. Instantly, that guy's dead. And then they take a hold of his body. He's cremated 10 days later. There's no press conference. There's no toxicology report. No one talks about it on the news.
Right.
Everything Joe Rogan said is 100% factual and proven. But right now, over 80 million Americans rightfully think that the US government most likely had something to do with Trump's assassination, or at least it was a very well-orchestrated plot with some insider information. From one crazy thing to something that's crazy for a completely different reason, JD Vance makes an interesting point on why he believes so many middle-class white people are becoming trans.
The one way that those people can participate in the DEI bureaucracy in this country is to be trans. If you become trans, that is the way to reject your white privilege, right? That's the social signifier.
Yeah.
The only one that's available in the hyper woke mindset is if you become gender non-binary.
Non-binary is the best one because you don't even have to do anything. You can just say I could say I'm non-binary.
I think he's 100% right because they try to make white people feel so bad for their history. For example, we live in 2 completely different sets of America right now. Half of the people celebrate Columbus Day and half of the people celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. When I woke up, I got both of those notifications on my phone. But in school, they tell you about all the terrible things that white people did. Those are all the points that they highlight in history. Oh, World War I, slavery, the Civil Rights Movement. Oh, there were so many bad white people. There's a lot of depth and layers to this, and there is a lot of bad white people, but it's no reason to try to make the current white people feel bad for what ancestors in the past did. and make them feel so bad that they have to feel trans to just get in this DEI agenda. A little bit deeper in the podcast, JD Vance shares a surprising fact and how he got red pilled on vaccines.
Hey, I took the vax, and I haven't been boosted or anything, but the moment where I really started to get red pilled on the whole vax thing was the sickest that I've been in the last 15 years by far was when I took the vaccine. I was in bed for 2 days. My heart was racing. I was like, the fact that we're not even allowed to talk about that.
I share a very similar experience to JD Vance. I got the first and second COVID shot and never got a booster because after the second COVID shot, I got extremely sick. That got me a little bit skeptical as vaccines as a whole. So I started talking to my current girlfriend about how I want to do research into each individual vaccine that we're going to give our newborn children. Just to come to realize that you need over 18 mandatory vaccines throughout a child's life just for them to be able to go to public school. Something about that doesn't seem right, that they're forcing you to get the shots to attend public school. JD Vance then moves the conversation to the subject of Joe and Hunter Biden, where he offers a very funny take on Hunter.
Is the anti-Hunter Biden stuff. I want to go hang out with Hunter Biden. I would bet $100 that Hunter Biden is voting for Donald Trump for president.
It doesn't seem like he likes his dad. It seems like
I
he
think
wanted...
his dad. I might bet $20 on his dad voting for Donald Trump for president, especially last night after the garbage comment.
Oh yeah,
that guy is trying to help.
I don't think people really talk about how likely it is that Joe Biden is actually trying to sabotage Kamala. First, there was the infamous MAGA hat situation, which JD Vance tells in the interview, and we seen in the video that he kept, that there's then this video of him walking up the stairs of a plane holding a suspicious red hat just to get to the top of the stairs and reveal it's a blank hat. There was then the whole debacle during the hurricane where Kamala said one thing about DeSantis, and then Joe Biden said that, yeah, DeSantis is doing a great job with the hurricane. Then most recently, Joe Biden, right after the Democrats take a huge win with a genuinely unfunny joke at Trump's MSG rally, Joe Biden calls all Trump supporters garbage. Tell me that it doesn't seem suspicious at the very least. Further on the subject of Hunter Biden, they talk about how Zuckerberg openly admitted on the Joe Rogan podcast that he suppressed that story.
When I discussed that with Zuckerberg, and he openly admitted it, that the FBI had contacted him and told him that it was Russian disinformation. Correct. And that was one of those things while he was saying, I was like, this guy's just saying this?
Yeah.
The Biden administration genuinely paid off and forced Mark Zuckerberg to censor conservative information that turned out to be true. Then the Democrats will continue to demonize and say that they don't understand why the Republicans say anything about election interference. I'll say that widespread election fraud is not proven. But the idea that this is not election interference in the slightest is crazy. They circle back to the subject of the trans issue when they talk about how Twitter used to handle it when you would so-called dead name people.
It's moving further and further away from normalcy.
If you say that an 11-year-old should not get gender transition drugs, that is hate speech according to a significant subset of the left.
Yeah, if you call Caitlyn Jenner Bruce Jenner, that's hate speech.
A lot of people would say that's hate speech.
And you used to get banned for life from Twitter for dead naming someone.
Yes.
Which is just bananas.
Which is totally bananas.
I can get by calling you by whatever name you want to be called by. People can change their names after all. If you legally change it, I'll call you by it. But this idea that it's hate speech to misgender somebody, for me to gender you what you want, makes me contradict my beliefs, religious or otherwise. So I'll call you whatever name you want to be called, but the idea that I will misgender you, and I'll even risk saying that on YouTube, I will not call a trans person by the gender that they prefer, just their name. I will just say their name. Rogan and Vance quickly after that bring up an interesting story that I'm sure you've all heard about the Washington Post refusing to endorse Harris by the behest of Jeff Bezos. Recently, I've been seeing people on X, such as Mark Hamill and many other people, canceling their subscription to the Washington Post just because they refuse to offer an endorsement of Harris. My response to that is weird flex, but okay. All they're doing by canceling their Washington Post subscriptions is openly admitting that they will only listen to news sources that are 100% biased in favoring a certain candidate. We wonder why the divide is so big when the left won't even listen to ideas that could just be center. It's not like they're endorsing Trump either. Further on the subject of the other side being a bit delusional, Vance compares Harris to his child eating Oreos.
4-year-old is helping me. He likes to help me out a lot when I bake. And I go to the bathroom, and the Oreos that we're supposed to put in the Oreo cake, like crumble them up and put them in the cake, like half of them are gone when I get back. And I'm like, buddy, what happened to the Oreos? And he looks at me, and without a hint of irony or shame, he says, I didn't eat the Oreos, you did. That's the way that Kamala Harris lies, is I didn't eat the Oreos, you did.
The crazy thing is that the left is truly like this. Everybody remembers Trump's infamous comment to Hillary that he'd put her in jail if he was in charge of the country. Trump actually said that. Those words literally came out of his mouth, that he would put Hillary in jail. Now you have people like Joe Biden and Harris and all these individuals online who are afraid Trump's gonna lock them up for some unknown reason, when he literally didn't do it when he said he was going to do it. Meanwhile, the Democrats are actually locking up Trump and other Republicans. The last subject I want to bring up that they talk about is actually my least favorite subject in all of politics, which for YouTube's sake, we'll just call reproductive rights.
I think life really matters. And other people are trying to say, I think autonomy really matters. And the truth is that 95% of Americans would probably say there's some way to strike the balance in the middle. Almost every place in Europe has ended up effectively where late-term abortion outside of cases of medical necessity is banned outright. And then, early stage abortion is allowed. That's how most societies that democratically settle on this, that's how they strike the balance.
I think JD Vance is 100% right that we could find a balance like many of the European democracies, and that I don't agree with late-term abortion at all. I wouldn't support anybody in my family doing it. I'm starting to agree with Roe versus Wade more and more as it goes on. The more that it's talked about, the more people are going to get these procedures in retaliation. If you look at the rates for those in Europe as opposed to our country is way higher despite it being definitively legal in others. Not to mention, Trump's biggest risk of losing this election is an overwhelming women vote against him just because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So at the end of the day, I believe this is an issue we should just allow to be as it is and move on to some other policies. But anyway, that's about all I have to say about the podcast. Make sure you check out the full thing on Joe Rogan's YouTube channel or anywhere you watch podcasts. Make sure you hit a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.